Today, I have the amazing Helen Lim and JR Cimatu on the Awaken Feminine podcast, and they're both joining me from LA, USA. Welcome to the show.
Thank you,
I'm really
Kaki. It's great to be here.
excited. I'm really
Yeah,
so,
thank you.
I'm so excited, and I'm also really sorry that I was like, oh yeah, usually I only have one guest on, so they were just like, oh yeah, and then I think both of you, am I supposed to like say something right now?
I know, right?
I love it. So this is the first time I've had like two guests on, and JR and Helen come as a pair because of things that they do. So I'm really excited for our conversation. So I'd love for you guys to introduce yourself and just tell us who you are and what you do briefly. I'm going to do something different. I'm not going to do ladies first. I'm going to go with JR. So JR, you go
Oh,
first.
all right. Here we go. My name is JR Cimatu. I am a spiritual awakening coach and a TV editor. I'm the host of the Awaken Now What podcast with my co-host, Helen Lim. We've been podcasting now for about 2 years, and our journey together has expanded so much. It's expanded our consciousness so much doing these podcasts. And throughout my history, my awakening, I woke up about 5-6 years ago, and I really didn't know what it was. I didn't know what I was going through. I realized I had an interconnection to everything, to all that was, to all that is, to God, source, prime creator. And at that time, I didn't put any labels on it. I just knew it was a deep inner knowingness. And yeah, I would fall asleep at night crying sometimes, just journaling in my phone, just like what my thoughts, my ideas, my insights, my revelations, my epiphanies. And at the time, I wasn't on social media at all. My friends weren't spiritually awakened at that time, so I couldn't really speak about this matter to them. And sometimes I did. Sometimes I chose to. I chose to talk about what I was going through, but it wasn't in their sphere of awareness. And so I climbed back up. I didn't talk to them about my experiences to them, and I kept journaling. I kept reading. I kept learning, and eventually I found a community, online communities where they were validating and confirming everything that I was going through. And my journey over the past 5-6 years now has been about bringing more of this information to light, so that people who are, I mean, we're going through crazy times right now. There's alien sightings all over the world. Post pandemic, people are searching for answers. People are waking up by the masses. And so what me and Helen are trying to do is we're really just trying to bring this information so that it's more accessible to a wider group of population and the masses.
Mm, I love that. And I thank you for sharing your journey with us. Helen, can you share?
Yeah, so my journey, I don't know that I knew it was a journey to be had. I was just kind of going through life, but it definitely was a lot of questioning and breaking open of who I knew myself to be, which was catalyzed by the ending of a 7-year relationship when I was 28. And I really thought that I was going to marry this man and just had put all of my energy and love into that, but it wasn't meant to be. So then, since all of that was pulled out from under me, I had to do a lot of questioning and wondering, and I was led to yoga, which opened up my understanding of spirituality, and then just furthering my curiosities until I was able to sit with plant medicine, ayahuasca, and frog medicine, 5-MeO-DMT, which then I understood what it means that we are all one, because I had the lived experience of it. If that's the best way you could describe it, I suppose, because words wouldn't do that state justice. And yeah, since I've just been really opening my heart more and more, and in a society that is so structured, so by the rules, opening your heart is like such a counterintuitive way to live and takes a lot of bravery and is like going against the grain. And because it can seem so like unaware in your journey, with Awaken Now, what we are helping people to illuminate that journey of spiritual awakening and ascension, and really the whole reason JR and I show up all the time is because we want people to know that they have the community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Helen, can you share what you do apart from podcasting?
Oh, yes. I am, I would say, mostly an energetic healer. I work around integrating our traumas and then also teaching people how to manifest more from a love point of view rather than always having to integrate our traumas. And I do a lot of application of human design in that sense and gene keys.
Mm, love it. Thanks for sharing what you do and your journey. So like a bit of your journey, I'm really excited to just dive deeper into it. But before we go there, I always love to ask my guest this question, and it's going to be a fun, it's going to be a different experience because I've got male and a female. And, this question is, I love to know, what is your definition of an awakened feminine? So for Helen, that's what I want you to answer. But for JR, maybe what your perception of awakened feminine, not an awakened feminine, but what awakened feminine means. So we'll go Helen first this time.
This is fun and so on point for, the name of your podcast. So I think, or I intuit that awakened feminine is definitely more intuition based. And it's available. It's actually already a part of every human. And awakening it means you're more in touch with your intuition, in touch with all that surrounds you and is nature. It's the part of you that seeks more harmony. And it gives a lot of the life force to everything, like how a mother births life, like an awakened feminine wants to bring life to the places that it touches.
I love that. Thank you. And JR?
Yeah. So for me, the feminine, I don't think about gender. I think about the energy, the feminine energy, because we all possess the feminine. We all come from the feminine. And so awakened feminine means that you are awake to your feminine energies. You're awake to your feminine powers as a human being, male or female. And what that encompasses is your true divine power of creation. And that's really, that really just resonates with me. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your perspectives of awakened feminine. Now let's dive in. We're going to be talking about how to get through your spiritual awakening, and you both have already shared a bit about your awakening story. JR, do you want to share with us, why you guys wanted to specifically talk about this topic, right now?
As it pertains to our podcast or this
conversation? As this conversation. I think it also pertains to your podcast because that's what you guys talk about. But just in general, why this conversation is important.
Yeah, I think people are just waking up. People are waking up in the masses. They call this the Great Awakening. And back in 2012, when we entered the age of Aquarius, there was a massive shift cosmically across the multiverse. And we were constantly getting these energies from the sun and the galactic central sun. And we all plan to wake up in this lifetime. And it's just, I think what we were called to do was to bring more of this information to so many different people. And when I look at the demographics of our audience, Helen, and we get listeners from places like Croatia and Malaysia and Sweden and Norway. I'm like, great. People have access to this information. People are waking up. People inherently within their cellular memory know that they're supposed to come across this information at the right specific time. And we just use the vehicle, our vehicle, our voices, aside from the podcast, to speak on your podcast. Our voices are the vehicles to carry this information across multiple platforms.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And yeah, I truly believe that this time right now, it's really important that we have these conversations because yeah, I mean, even people around me where I'm like, usually I'm like, oh, they're starting to have, I can start seeing that kind of like confused, oh,
Yeah.
something's not quite right, but I don't know who to ask. And I think that's the problem. I think, I don't know. So I started my awakening about 7 years ago. I didn't know where to look.
Mm.
Right. And it was lonely. I had like no idea. I thought I was going crazy. And then I started finding things. But it was a harder journey because I had to do everything on my own until I actually found people, right, that made sense. I'm like, oh, okay, this is what it all means.
Right. Were you married at the time?
I was. So my spiritual awakening started when I had my first child.
Interesting.
Mm,
So
yeah.
fascinating. So she or your first child was kind of like your catalyst.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Although when I think back, I think like I had that first like mini awakening the year that I got married and I went to Bali. So
Ah,
yeah,
Bali.
something happened there, but like for me, it didn't quite register. But when I had my daughter, it was like, okay, what is happening?
So, question about how was your husband during this whole experience for you? How did he support you? Did he know what you were going through as well, or was he just kind of?
My husband's very supportive. This is about you guys. Why are you asking me questions?
Sorry, I was just very
But
curious.
it all ties into what we're talking about. So my husband is like, he's amazing. He's very supportive. He had no idea what was going on. So I just started crying every single night. And he worked away. So like whenever he comes back, I'll be like, and I'll be crying on my own when he's away. And he didn't know how to support me. All he knew was just to hold space and just allow me to do whatever I needed to do. Men tend to have a thing of trying to fix you or trying to tell you like, oh, maybe you should do this or that. And I'll be like, and then I think he realized not to do that and just like, give me hugs when I needed to and just let me do whatever. And he continues to do that because he's not particularly spiritual. He's gone through like a personal growth, like mindset growth, but he hasn't gone through to the spiritual awakening as yet. So he just like, okay, you just do what you have to do. So he's very good at holding that space and making me feel secure. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So that's mine. So Helen, I wanted to ask you, I know you used to be a pharmacist. So spiritual awakening probably for you, similar to me, would be like, what is happening? and then tying in the whole family piece as well. Can you just share a bit about how it all happened for you and how you kind of got through to the other side?
Yeah, it's been a long journey. And I think I'm still with the family piece. Like it's still ongoing because there's the part that you start to feel like really different from people, which is so fascinating because if we think about being spiritually awakened, we like know we're all one, but then we feel so different from people. So it's like the existence of that paradox, which I think is actually a developed stage of spirituality because then we recognize the paradox of all. But I digress. When I was going through it myself, I think it was what would be like an upwelling of all the like my insecurities, right? So then it's like because I'm an adult and I have better resources, these insecurities need to come up so that they can be the wisdom that they had in them can be integrated, and that way I am showing up in my relationships better. And then I'm not the one judging myself as weird or seeing myself as separate. It's also a growth journey of self-love because we are seeing ourselves as weird only because we haven't reached that level of self-love. And so daily practices, finding the right coaches, finding the right therapists, making sure that I am committed to that path of love. And it's not even about like practicing self-love too, as much as we can remember it, right? And live as love, because we know we're all energy. And so really just tuning into that frequency of love and then living through that space.
I wanted to ask you, how did it manifest, like symptom wise for you?
Oh,
yeah.
There was a period where my empathy was like too much. Like I remember going to a night market event with my cousins, and like as soon as I stepped onto that kind of fairgrounds, like I felt all of the energy of everyone, and I like started to almost panic. So that anxiety was very heightened. What else? There was a lot of crying, but then it was still like very guarded crying, because there was like a part of me that was like fighting the amount of crying that needed to happen. What else? I think the empathy, that being the empath thing stood out the most, just because it's like, oh, like why do I feel so much, and it's not even my own stuff. And recognizing that was because of, I think JR can speak to this more. I know we've had some episodes about this, but like the lowest psychic power, right, JR, as what empathy is, and
right,
being an empath is. Yeah.
Yeah. JR, do you want to talk to it and also share with us what symptoms or what signs like were showing up as you started your spiritual awakening?
Yeah. So as far as the symptoms and the signs, as soon as you enter that shift, right, when you break the illusion, as they say, the illusion of separation, when I realized that there was no separation, and that I was connected to the grand scale of the multiverse, there is an emotional development that needs to be had, because I went through bouts of anger, depression, knowing that the identity that I created up until my awakening was all just an illusion. It was all just the ego. It was all just me trying to find that place in this gigantic, infinite universe. When I realized that was an illusion, I broke. I went through, again, bouts of anger, depression, sadness. Like I was trying to find, the ego was trying to find another identity, but it couldn't. The identity was just the true self, which was, all that is, God, source, prime creator. And man, it was lots of crying. Dark nights of the soul, that's what they call it, as the ego dissolution. And I think at that time, I didn't know how to regulate my emotions. I was trying to find meaning in this new shift of perspective, in this shift of frequency. And for the listeners out there, it's really just like, let it all out. That's what goes on when you awaken. Let it out, because that's how you heal it. Cry if you need to. Stay in bed all day if you need to. And I did that multiple times. There were times where I didn't know how to regulate my diet. I was eating pizzas and hamburgers and all this trash food because it's all I could do. That's all I wanted to do. I was eating ice cream at night. Aside from all the depressing stuff, it's also a point of celebration. We can list all these symptoms and all these signs and these emotions of anger and sadness, but it's a celebration at the end of it, because you are awakened. You know, you have a deep inner awareness that there's more to life than just this one lifetime, and embrace that. As for the empathy being one of the lowest psychic skills, yes, me and Helen we talked about that in one of our episodes, where empathy takes you out of your intuition is far more powerful than your empathy will ever be. I'm not trying to say never use your empathy, because there are times where it can be useful. It's one tool in the tool bag, but your intuition, you should rely on your intuition first. Empathy takes you out of your body and into someone else's body to gain information and to process and unpack and decode that information. Whereas your intuition, it exceeds that. And yeah, no, that's my take on, empathy and intuition.
Yeah, no, thank you. That was really great. That explanation for people to understand like when to use empathy and intuition, and that intuition is the more powerful. So yes, and definitely it's a celebration, because I mean, why wouldn't you celebrate yourself when
Right.
you've awakened, right? It's like the
Right.
best thing, even though sometimes it's hard and challenging and all the things, but yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have it any other way. I wouldn't want to go back and put that veil back on.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, when you awaken, you kind of see through the illusion of the mass media, everything that the illusion of politics and government. Just this visceral feeling when I awakened, I was watching TV. I'm like, and I was watching the news or politics or anything from the government. I would call bullshit. I would say bullshit. Anything from big pharma and modern medicine, I'd say bullshit. There's more to healing than what you're offering me. And so I'm going to find the truth.
Yeah, it's interesting because, being a pharmacist back in the days, I would not even like, you learn to conform. I think when you go to university, like as you go through life, you just conform because that's what you're told to do. And
Yep.
then once you wake up, you're like, okay, everything that I believed in, that I knew is not true.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That
so
was
now what, guys? Now what?
Right.
Like,
Right. Now
Oh my
what? That's
God.
actually, yeah, I asked that question to myself so many times. Now what? I would finish reading a book, right? I remember I finished reading The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle, and it was great information and it was great healing tips for the awakening journey. Then I was standing in my bathroom looking around. I said, now what? Now what do I do? I should have stopped asking that question because there was a slew of information. There's still there. You can go down the rabbit hole. You can go down the rabbit hole of esoterics. And when Helen was actually, she was the brilliant mind behind naming our show. And when I read that, I was like, perfect. Yes. Now what? We continue our podcast. We continue to give information on esoterics and healing and energy. And so hopefully, we'll continue to do that for the long run.
I want to ask you, Helen, how did you guys meet and decide to be in partnership to do, the work that you guys do with a podcast?
That's a very fun thing to share. So I'm glad you asked. So funny enough, JR and I met through my ex because he and my ex are best friends. So very would not have expected to continue this friendship. And then as that relationship was on its way to changing from boyfriend, girlfriend to friends, JR, one night, I guess we were in a conversation, and then I just started bringing up a lot more spiritual topics, and JR kept engaging with me. And so knowing that we both had these interests, we started having those spiritual conversations more. And then JR shared a recording that he had with the galactic historian Andrew Bartas. And I went to JR and I said, JR, you have a great voice. Like, have you ever thought about podcasting? And then he returned the question to me and said, what if we do a podcast together? And I agreed. And so here we are, two seasons later, enjoying what we do and just knowing that it's a soul calling, soul work. Because, JR will text me sometimes and be like, this is so easy. This is so fun. And I'll just like feel the resonance in my whole being. Like, you guys are supposed to do this. Keep doing this. And we even marvel at like when we are recording with our guests, and it's almost as if JR and I don't speak, and something about the container that we hold, our guests are just like, like, wow.
Yeah. Oh, that is so cool. How it just so organically happened. It's not like, hey, I need to look for someone that will co-host with me, and having all these different things. It's just like, hey, let's just do it. I love that. I love it when those things happen. Yeah. Now, we're talking about how to get through spiritual awakening. So, JR, can you share with us, like, because I know you were sharing that you didn't know where to go, and then it's like, well, what do I do now? Like,
Right.
and I guess maybe if you can share with us, how did you find out that you were awakening? Because pe people tend to think you just kind of wake up one day and kind of know, or
Right.
you just know, but you don't. You don't know that you're awakening. So when did you find out in the journey that you were actually awakening? And then what were the things that you did to kind of get you through to the other side?
Right. That's a great question. So at the time, I didn't put any labels on it because I was completely unaware of what it was, and I was journaling and journaling and journaling of all these thoughts and revelations and epiphanies. And one day, I remember the day so clearly. I just kept, having questions. Questions kept coming up in my mind, and new ideas kept coming up in my mind. I was like, "Fuck it." I'm sorry. Can we
Yes, you
cuss on
can. You
here?
can. You
Okay.
can swear as much as you want. That's fine.
Cool. So I said, "Fuck it," and I went on Google and I typed in spirituality, Los Angeles, and it took me to a place of these stores, markets, resources in Los Angeles with spirituality attached to it. And the first place that came up it's called the House of Intuition. And at the time, there was only one location in Silver Lake in Los Angeles. Now they're national. They have multiple locations in Florida, New York, across the country. But at the time, it was only one location. And so I looked up a healer and a medium, and I wanted to have a session. Because I felt like I was intuitively called that this person would have answers for me. And I booked the session, and her name was Terry Smith. Helen. Her name was Terry Smith, who I'm now very good friends with to this day. So I went to go see her at the House of Intuition, and she laid out everything for me. She was like, "This is what you're going through. Read this, read this, read this, read this." And at the time, I was like, I was overwhelmed. I was still overwhelmed by the awakening, by the symptoms. But I read all the resources, and I was like, "Holy shit. This is exactly what I've been going through. This is exactly what I needed." I'm glad I typed in spirituality Los Angeles in Google, and it took me here. And from that point forward, it transformed my life. It catapulted me to major transformations from that day. I knew what I was going through. I could communicate what I was going through to other people, because at the time before that, I couldn't really communicate what I was going through. I didn't have the tools to. And I think one of the biggest things I've learned through that journey to get through the awakening is to be patient with yourself and to allow all those feelings to go through you, to allow all the tears to flow through you. And there are points of bliss, knowing that you are, attached to complete oneness. I remember walking down the street, and I was like looking at everyone and just like shooting love from my heart chakra to everyone I was walking past. There are moments of bliss and there are moments of peace. So, a little bit more tips on getting through that is, I think Terry Smith put it so greatly. It was, the best way to integrate all this knowledge of the awakening is to sleep. Sleep, re-energize the soul, re-energize the body, and just sleep. Sleep, because when you get the right amount of rest, you'll have the right amount of energy after that to do other things, to live life, to do things that aren't spiritual. To be with your friends, to be allowed to allow yourself to experience things, to enjoy things. And I think that's probably one of the biggest pieces of advice I can give to anyone who's on the awakening journey. Just allow yourself to do things that aren't spiritual. Allow yourself to be in life and just live.
Thank you for sharing that. And Helen, can you share with us when you discovered that you were awakening and how you got through your journey, how you got through your awakening, the initial awakening?
Hmm. I think so. I think the spiritual awakening, I think I would probably associate that with the ayahuasca because, like, I think just identity awakening was more of the breakup one. So if I think about my spiritual awakening, there was a lot of tenderness that needs to go with integration just because it felt like such a huge opening, right? Like there's just like if living in the ego and the 3D is a box, like the box opened, right? Like from all four sides. So it's like what? And to be gentle and patient and deliberate because what you integrate, like let it be light, right? Don't go backwards into what's more dense and like what's more anger or a lower consciousness. Like, be pulled toward the light, have trust in the light. I think trusting is also a big part of it. And I also like JR's advice of allowing, because once you allow yourself to be in those ways, you're also allowing like new energy, you're allowing that trust, really getting out of your own way. And when I say that, it's like getting out of your own way in your thought constructs, getting out of your own way in an ego, getting out of your own way through the fears. And like when we talk about, or when we hear the New Age community talk about love, it's about letting that love be your state and have it come out of you. And I think that is a lot of what JR and I hit home to our audience. And when we're talking about self-mastery, it's that we love to remind people that you are God incarnate. And so live from that place of just the ever supreme love that is us as God incarnate.
Thank you for sharing that. So Helen, I've got this question's like popped up. So being a pharmacist, right? What made you go, I'm going to try ayahuasca? Did you go, I'm going to look at the pharmacology and like what's all the usual pharmacist things that you do. I'm really interested.
So fun. Yeah. So this is fun because I was going to circle back to the Bali connection. So I got led when we were more intuitive, we do. When I was in Bali, I met a guy and he's the one that introduced me to ayahuasca at least before that I had heard about it because I was then in a travel group and people were talking about taking or having ayahuasca ceremonies when we got to South America, but I wasn't really familiar with really what it was. But when I met this man in Bali and he was sharing his experiences with me, he was the one that first introduced me really to what healing is. And so when I did my own research, I did watch how DMT enters the bloodstream and what it does in the blood-brain barrier and everything. But I guess maybe it just was also a curiosity in the experiential standpoint of being a pharmacist, right? Like what do these chemicals do in our body when we feel them and when it's a more natural product rather than a lab synthesized chemical product, right? And so I don't know that my rational pharmacist brain was really online when I said, okay, I'm going to go do some ayahuasca ceremony. It was more of that was what my soul wants to experience in this lifetime.
That's so funny because I'm so fascinated with it. And, my pharmacist brain is like left quite a few years ago. And, now it's just like, I just want to do it. I don't care.
Same here.
But haven't got to try it as yet. But I know that when it's the right time, it will happen. JR, I wanted to ask you, so, when you awakened, you realize that, you are one with everything.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And we want to feel love for ourselves and for everyone around us. Mm-hmm. But we are still living in this 3D earth. And there are things in life that happen that piss you off. You're just
Yeah.
like, why the fuck did that happen? I'm not happy with this. And you're like, you're connected to source. And then you go, why? Can you share can you share with our audience, how to like navigate that? Because you go, well, I'm awakened and I'm doing all this work, right? And I'm not getting to where I want to be, or I don't feel love and light all the time, right?
Right.
So just navigating that piece, I think, is important.
Right. That's a great question. To navigate life right after the awakening, I think that's one of the biggest reasons why me and Helen created that podcast. It's how do I approach creating new relationships? How do I approach creating a business? How do I navigate stressful situations where I'm pissed off, where someone just cut me off in traffic? And once you do a little research and dig more deeper into energy and karma, you realize that there's some sort of karmic resolution for most of us on this planet that we have to experience and we have to resolve. Maybe we did something to a past life, to that guy who just cut us off in traffic. Maybe we have something to resolve with a family member who keeps stabbing us in the back. And a bigger part is realizing the energy behind your body, and all the energy and dense energies that you need to resolve in yourself. Noticing the triggers, I think, is the biggest part. Being aware of how you're triggered, and then journaling it, and then can you flip that frequency the next time it happens? I think that is one of the biggest things I've learned. Me and my girlfriend have never had an argument, but we get annoyed and frustrated a lot with each other. Not a lot, but at times. And I'll be the first one to admit to her and to myself that whenever I'm annoyed or frustrated, it has everything to do with me and nothing to do with her. And so I'll notice that and I'll sit with it. And I'll flip that frequency. And yeah, that's probably one of the biggest pieces of advice as to how to navigate those situations, because it's not all of light all the time. It's not. You're going to have to deal with the 3D life of, going to work, paying your bills, going to sleep at night, doing laundry, all that shit, because we're still in the physical. It's how much can we channel those higher frequencies of the fifth dimension and up into these bodies and continue to emanate throughout the rest of our lives. That's a challenge. That's a challenge for everyone who is awakened.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I love that you and your girlfriend don't fight. That's just
yeah,
that's just awesome.
We don't.
Yeah. And to be that self-aware, to go, oh, hey, it's because of this is triggering me. It's not you. So right. Yeah,
I'll give an example. I grew up a neat freak, and in college I was heavily traumatized because my college roommate, who was also my best friend, was just complete slob, never did the dishes, wouldn't do the dishes for a few months. I'm not even joking. Would leave a glass of milk out. Yeah, it was disgusting. It was disgusting. Imagine the bathroom. We were both college students, two guys living in the same apartment. The bathroom was disgusting. I was just completely traumatized. I brought up the story of the milk. He would leave a glass of milk on the dining room table or on the coffee table for 4 months, not even joking. And if you saw the inside of the glass, it was all just crusted and dehydrated milk. And I saw him pick it up because I was just waiting for him to clean it up. I saw him pick it up. He goes, "Oh, that's gross," and puts it back down. I'm like, what is wrong with you? What is wrong with you? So when I moved out, oh my God, I was so happy to move out. But even before that, and even after that, I just kind of turned into I like to have a clean space, no clutter. I like to clean a lot. And that's something I need to heal through. That's trauma I need to heal through. And I'm completely aware of that. And so sometimes I'll just I'll sit with that. I'm like, hey, you don't have to clean up every crumb every time. You don't have to be a neat freak. And my girlfriend, she'll just leave crumbs everywhere. So it was an adjustment when we first moved in. I would walk into the kitchen, I would see stains on the marble. We have my white marble for our island. I'll just be looking at it, and I just can't get it. I notice my anger, but it's coming from a deeper place, and I really, really try to flip that frequency. Like I said, I really try to flip that frequency.
Mm. Thank you for sharing that. It's a great example because I grew up in a family where my mum's a neat and clean freak.
Yeah.
And and I used to be someone that likes things done a certain way. And sometimes that obviously still comes back. So when my husband folds clothes, I was like, that's not how you fold it.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I know exactly what you mean.
I love it. I love it. But it's funny because I haven't met anyone else that's told me that they don't fight. And because my husband and I don't fight. And I think, yes. And I think it comes from a space that he's just like really chilled and relaxed, and he just lets me go off on my little tanty and then come back. But, again, like since the awakening is like, I know it's me and it's got nothing to do with him.
Right.
And so I still have my little tantrums, and my, in my head, it's like, 𝐸𝐸, you need to stop doing this. And I'm like, I don't want to. I'm just going to like throw a tantrum. And then I'll go back and say, I'm sorry, that was because, whatever.
And that's a challenge. That is an evolved perspective on how to approach a relationship. Because, I mean, if you go to any therapist, or if you're unawakened, if you go to any therapist and you try to, counsel your relationship, they'll tell you so many different things of addressing your needs and your wants and all that. And it's just such a higher perspective when you approach it from an awakened state of mind.
Now, Helen, I want to ask you, because you mentioned self-love at the beginning, and the love and light piece. When the shadows come out, how can people still love themselves when they're like, that's not the part I love about myself?
This is such a good question because we all go through it, right? And I think in my experience now that I've come to, I've noticed like there's a first, like first we'll reject it, right? Because it's like we don't want to be that part. And like we're just trying to get rid of it, like trying to remove it from ourselves. And then as you keep repeating that process and then just keep not feeling like completely whole and healed, there's like looking at that shadow, right? So then you're like, okay, what is this shadow? Kind of talking about JR, you shared with your anger, and 𝐸𝐸 looking at your own tantrums and what you showed up with. For me, it's a lot of like, why do I keep my mouth shut? Like looking at these little things of essentially they don't serve us. But also recognizing that there is a gift, and that's why they are our shadow. It's almost like they crave the light to be shined on them, right? So that they can then flourish and become this bright part of ourselves. So yeah, we go through rejection, then we go through just looking at it, awareness, hopefully being neutral about it. And then even if a more evolved form is being able to love it. And when it comes up, not even judging it, just knowing that, oh, this is like an echo or something that is showing me I need to heal something. And so now it's like, what do I want to learn from it? JR, what are you learning from looking at the stain on the marble, 𝐸𝐸, what are your tantrums telling you? And for me, whenever I'm keeping my mouth shut, it's like I there's a fear of being persecuted, like past lives, obviously all of us probably being healers in past lives, but recognizing that in this lifetime, it means so much more to speak up, because it's not just about my life. It's like, I'm here for the collective, and everybody needs that voice heard.
Thank you for sharing that. I just thought it was really important to talk about that, because there's so much, I think, in some certain spiritual communities, like love and light, you just have to be love and light. And then you start going, well, I don't feel love and light, and you
Right.
start, and it's not helpful. It's actually not helpful.
Mm.
Yeah. I lost my question. As Helen was talking, I'm like, I had a question to ask, and now I've forgotten it. But it's okay.
Tammy,
I'll ask another
we're
question.
doing well in the
Yeah,
flow.
in the flow, in the flow. I wanted to ask you guys, let me go back. I've totally got lost it. It's okay. Um, it doesn't want to come back. That's okay. I wanted to ask you, okay, what do you guys really want? What? I remember my question now. I was like, it was an important question. Okay, it's come back now. Okay, that will all get edited out. But anyway, before your awakening. So before your awakening, because we all talked about past lives, multiverses, all of those things. Did you believe, or what were your beliefs around that before? Like, how have your beliefs around like incarnation and different universes and all those things changed since your awakening? JR.
So I was actually more of a religious person before my awakening. I grew up in a Catholic household where I went to church every Sunday, and I had to go to church. And so it was more of those teachings from the Bible, teachings of strict Catholicism. And I didn't really have a sense of awareness of the universe or reincarnation or other extraterrestrials. So yeah, I didn't really know what to think. I can't really, like, when I think back on it, I'm like, I didn't really have an opinion or perspective, but I was always afraid of ghosts and spirits. So there is that part of it. But yeah, the awakening just, it's shattered my past perspectives and illusions of what religion was. When I awakened, I did a deep dive into more esoterics and found out that, religion's probably one of the biggest lies in humanity, and it was done on purpose. And it yeah. I mean, it was such a journey.
Mm. Yeah, going from religious and shattering that belief, that would have been massive. Helen, what about you?
I find that subconsciously, I always had an inkling toward the spiritual or the spirits. And I was brought up in a more Buddhist household, so reincarnations were talked about. I actually was born with a birthmark. So, like, I would always get told the story that, there's a reason you have that, like, and such. And then going into school, I was introduced to Christian religion. The community I grew up in had a lot of Christians. So then hearing about Jesus, hearing about God, but then not really understanding how they played into the world of understanding the spirits because of like seeing people who go to church behave different than what they would say the morals are. And then I think, yeah. And then when I went to college or university, definitely atheism. It's just like, no, there's no God. Like what? and into nihilism, like, oh, there's no reason for us to be here. So like very, very different from who I am today.
That's great.
Oh, I love it. I'm looking at the time and I'm like, I don't want this conversation to stop. But just a quick question. Well, why do you think you are here now? Like, Helen.
Oh, well, that's so fun. Well, to do podcasts with JR, to be the magnetic generator I am and spread a lot of joy and love and cheer, and to like uplift consciousness. Like there was this beautiful quote I read where if you're unconscious, you're falling in love, but when you're conscious, you're rising in love. So I'm really taking that rising in love to heart. And that reminds me too of a conversation JR and I had around when we were both single and looking for our partners, like he and I would talk about, oh, like it's actually about creating a life and creating a world with your partner. And that like totally shifted our paradigm about why we're here.
I love it. Thank you, Helen. And JR, why do you think you're here at this time on Earth?
Right. To spread the messages and information of the awakening. I think that's what we're doing. And over the past few weeks, we've been recording and editing a new intro for our podcast and a new trailer. And I've been in there late nights every night for the past few weeks. And I think it was last night or the night before, I was sat there. I'm like, I'm working really hard, but this doesn't feel like work. I'm having fucking fun. I'm taking the time and energy to complete these fun episodes, these fun trailers. And I told you, 𝐸𝐞𝐥𝐞, before this podcast actually during this podcast, sorry, that I'm a TV editor. I spent the past decade in reality TV editing, and so when I'm integrating and fusing that profession and that skill set to what I'm doing now, wow, it's a breeze, and I don't see it as work. Even though I've been in my office every night until 1:30 or 2 a.m. in the morning, and I'm working and I'm getting all this great content out. It's so fun to be doing this, and I'm going to continue to keep doing this as long as it's fun.
Yeah, I love that. Continue to do it as long as it's fun. And yeah, thank you so much for this conversation, both of you. It's been so much fun. Like I said, I don't want it to end, but also the good things come to an end at some point. But we can have another, chat or any other time as well. But yeah, JR, before we wrap up, can you share with our audience what you really would love for them to take away from this episode?
I think we mentioned it briefly. We didn't really go into too depth to it, but I think for those who have been awakened or for those who are just awakening, find community. Find community, because there are people who have gone through it before and can make your awakening so much easier. Find that support. Find these online communities. Listen to more podcasts that will help you, give you the tools, resources, techniques to help you through the awakening. It's not a fun time. Sometimes it's not a fun time. So just lean on community.
Beautiful. And Helen, what about you?
Oh, that was such a great answer. I would love the listeners to consider what they want to create, because as we know that we're all fragments of consciousness and God incarnate, that means that our whole nature is to create. And the more you create, you're going to feel like in your flow and in your godness of yourself, and just encourage them to create more.
That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And I've just loved our time together. Thank you so much for sharing your love and your wisdom with us. So if people want to find out more about you, or, how they can work with you, or where to find your podcast, where's the best place to go, Helen?
So to work with me personally on any integrations or human design work, you can email me, Helen@HelenCoaches.com. But our podcast, Awaken Now What, is available on all listening platforms and Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and we even have a YouTube channel.
Yay. And JR, if people want to work with you or find out more about you personally, where's the best place to go?
Yep. So if you guys want to work with me, you can find me and all my information at journeythroughtheawakening.com.
Perfect. I'll have all your details in the show notes so people can find you and listen to your amazing podcast and learn more about you two amazing souls. Thank you once again.
Thank you, 𝐸𝐸𝐥𝐞𝐥𝐞. This was so much fun.
Lots of fun.